Okay.
Hi, Bally.
Hey there, Charles. How you doing? Hi, we got Hyatt. Hello, Ivan.
Yeah.
Good to see you all.
Good to see
Uh,
you.
Tom's
Amazing.
decided to join us, I see. How are you?
Hey, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Good
Groovy.
morning. Good.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Hyatt.
Hyatt, how you doing? Good to see
Hi, I'm on my way, so I'll be on.
you.
I'm
Drive.
okay.
You
Thank
better?
you. Driving, yep. Yeah, much
Hmm.
better. Thank you.
Good. Stay safe, and we're going to go straight in. I've got slides. I will certainly share
Hmm.
slides, etc. Um, Charles, I believe this is your first one, so welcome. Lovely having you on. Um,
Thank you.
we've got coaches, business owners. Yeah, we've got Tom, who's PR. So amazing work that you're doing, and we've also got Anita here, which is amazing. So we've got a combination of coaches, entrepreneurs, leaders. So welcome, welcome, everyone. We're going straight in. I am going to share my slides and as you're going through what I'll delve into today, um, please share, pop in any pointers you may have. Okay, that's okay, Ivan. Thank you for letting me know. It's great that you're here. It's amazing. And so we're going to cover quite a lot since 2020. What we're going to see is there's been a huge shift in this space. So taking kind of a more of a macro view, a lot of us have been using a lot of these tools already, and so we'll see how far we've come, and you'll see how much growth you've also, along the way, how much you've been doing yourselves. And there are also opportunities, right? Some things that will come up for us. So I'm excited about this. So like I said, please, do ask questions. I don't mind being stopped. If you feel there's a questioning, you can always just unmute and ask. That is absolutely fine by me. Okay, so we'll go straight in, and we can also use the chat. And if I miss anything, please let me know. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And what we're going to see is we're going to see kind of where what's been happening, since kind of 2020. So, with the intention, this came about from the recent session we had 2 weeks ago, but even before that, as I was looking at how far have we come, and I'm having conversations with people outside this space. And there seems to be a bit of a disconnect with kind of how far we've come. So hence, oops, I think it looks like I've stopped sharing. So I'm just going to make sure it looked like I stopped sharing. So I'm just going to try that again. Sometimes that happens. So let me know if on your end it wasn't showing. Let me know. Sorry, it disappeared, it looked like. Is that sharing on your end? Is that okay? Let me just double check. Um, is it good?
Yep, all fine my side.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so the question has really sort of, looking at, we started as, and as you'll go through this, we'll all kind of have a sense of where we've come so far, to this date, April 2026, which is the 29th. So, as we've gone from curiosity, where we were looking at tools like GPT, we're going to go through some eras. So we've gone from kind of one of the phases of certainly asking AI, how can I do this? A lot of us are asking those questions. We've also gone to thinking about how to train AI to do it for me, and where we're moving at the moment. Sorry, my screen's just jumping. Um, Cloning our judgment, so AI operates as you. We're seeing a massive shift in that's the kind of direction we're going, and we'll see as we step into kind of the next few months where, there'll be a lot of questions as people are looking at kind of what's happened in the first quarter, certainly. Um, so so I started doing some research behind the scenes, looking at kind of what's the world, where does AI sit in all this, with leaders. I know a few of us are supporting leaders in our work. So based on kind of the recent data, what does it look like? So 80% of CEOs now, it's almost like it's absolutely the case that CEOs are forcing these capabilities. That's without question, that means there's going to be a shift in the way things are done. It's no longer a question of if, it's the question of when, and we're seeing much more of this happening at the moment. So there's a fundamental shift in the way organizations are taking AI. So we're going to see much more, and there's an understanding, and as we can see why over the last few years in this short span of time when what we think about. We're also seeing that on 78% there's a governance gap. So interesting that we're seeing this gap where executives can't confidently pass AI governance. So, and this is what's happening at the moment. They cannot sort of, confidently say, okay, we can pass these trails that we're having. So there is definitely a gap in the way we're seeing kind of this, this shaping out. So we're seeing the tools, as we've seen over the last few kind of, few years, how fast things have moved, but we're also seeing that there is a gap there in what do we do. We're seeing a shift. We've seen things like the EU Act, which it's coming into full force in of this year, which is in August of 2026. So, but we can see there's a long, as much to, there's a lot to be done. We're also seeing that 75% investment priority. Global leaders prioritize AI investment despite economic uncertainty. And we're seeing lots of this data coming through. If you've been reading or picking up the news, etc., you'll have seen a lot more investment, and you're wondering, okay, are we seeing the ROI? And hence we're at that kind of cusp, if you like, because there'll be revenue data coming through, kind of the end of year tax, etc. There are going to be a lot of kind of questions coming up in the next few days. So we're also seeing the 66% agent deployment. So we're seeing much more of organizations now deploying AI agents into their IT functions, which is not surprising if you think about where this space is going. So we've got 57% agents in production. So AI agents already in production. We're seeing much more happening. And we've also got then almost 3 trillion, billion global capital. And we're seeing sort of, from the investment from Secure, from Crunchbase, which doesn't, Crunchbase. Not surprising, as we're seeing a lot of this data come through, and these are all being backed with the recent data from. We're also seeing, and of course, this is why we're seeing much more push, if you like, with these frontier models. So over the last sort of few days, if you like, certainly in April, we've seen new models like Opus 4.7. And when we think that it couldn't get any, sharper than, in terms of reasoning than 4.6, we saw kind of, a couple of weeks ago, we saw, 4.7, Opus 4.7, which is the kind of high reasoning model that Anthropic has. And then we also saw a few days later, we saw GPT 5.5. A few days ago, we saw Ineffable, which is the intelligence raises, which was the large kind of shift, certainly for the UK. And so at the moment, we're in the 8th era, which is almost like, what does that mean? So this is based on some of the latest research that I pulled up. And this is kind of, these are the 8 tiers. And we're going to go through, well, when I say tiers, the eras. And these are based on the latest kind of research from Gartner, maturity model, if you think of the Boston consultancy group, McKinsey AI adoption research. We've gone from observers back in 2020. We'll talk a little bit more about this. We've seen prompt, we saw a whole shift with prompt engineering, crafting to framework building, platform building, and most people, I would say, are mostly in those top four. We're also kind of shifting to context creator. I've heard about context is king, strategic delegator, and agent player. So, and where we are at the moment in terms of landscape is this part here is the architecture of where things are. So, the whole orchestrator, the architecture in play. So, so these are sort of, let me just read that bottom here. It says these are dominant operating modes, not strict tiers, if you like. Most leaders straddle 2-8. So we're going to be in between different eras, if you like. Your highest era is what's possible. Your most frequent era is where you actually live. It's where we kind of function day to day. That's kind of how we would assess kind of where we are. Like where do we sit when we're using these AIs, whichever one we may be. So just kind of giving you a bit of context, what that means in kind of this space in the first foundation, if you like, from 1 to 4. So we've seen a massive shift. So, from going through kind of being the observer, this is some people watching from the sidelines, when people were talking about GPT-3 launches, and people were just kind of watching, a little bit suspicious, perhaps observing, what does this mean? All those questions. Seems like we've come a long way, but that wasn't that long ago if you think about it. And then there were no rules, there were no kind of, sort of guidelines what we're doing. People were just experimenting, people were generating images or not. And then it started opening up all the questions around, what does this mean? Can we use this? Can we not? What does this mean in this space? Suddenly everybody had, like a lot of people had access to AI. Then we saw a shift where we started seeing prompting becoming prevalent, like more people talking about it. We'd heard about it, but we didn't really know what that meant. So, use AI as question answer tool, quick wins, no carryover. There was nothing really happening once we just kind of ask a question, we get a response, nothing kind of helping us take it. Like, what do we do with it? Like, I don't know, we just put something on our social media or not. GPT lands, and we had actually, this was phenomenal. So we saw a massive uptake, 100 million users within 2 months. Fastest app, if you like, it was a chatbot, right? Growing in history, and you'd speak to people, hadn't heard of it, and then before you knew it, most people were using GPT. So we saw such an increase. So mindset, craft better questions to get better answers. That was always the thing, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Those are the kind of conversations people were having back then, also now, but much more at that space. And then we moved to framework builder, which kind of, we started thinking more about, what does this mean? We need things in place. So we started hearing about codifying or reusing prompts. If you remember, this was just kind of, I gave a talk back just at the beginning of 2024 to a group of entrepreneur females, and I was talking about kind of prompting or custom instructions, and people hadn't really heard about a lot of this at that time. And then we then started doing these sessions, and of course most of us have been here since. But we started like custom instructions, right? What does that mean? Saved workflows. We started hearing how do we use GPT so we can have our own GPTs, right? Things like LangChain, how do we then link things together? So it was the first conversation for most of us talking about orchestration of tools. And so now the mindset shifted to, how do we codify our processes so AI can repeat it for us? And we started having those type of questions. Especially pro or developers were having those questions that were, how can we support those in this space? Then we shifted to platform building. This is when many of us started building reusable AI tools like custom GPTs, or we started thinking about projects or Copilot agents. so that, not only do we use them, we can then share them. We can put our own knowledge base and we can then make them available for our clients. That would became a powerful thing, right? I know a lot of people did very well out of that. There was an author who, interesting story actually. She was sat in Thailand. She was supporting writers and she built GPTs, and that's all she used, built GPTs. And then what she would do is she would have the knowledge in that. All I'm saying is that's all, but actually she built that. That was her kind of intellectual property. But then she was supporting authors in completing and writing their kind of books and scripts, etc. So, and then we started seeing custom GPTs, open AI. We saw developmental, much more on the developmental side. We started seeing Claude projects. We heard things like GitHub. And so a lot of people, non-developers, could build without knowing about code. So people like myself, other people, we saw a lot more people that really started getting into this. So the mindset here was shifting from what was before without rules. We were like, what can we repeat so that our systems, if you like, our expertise can, we could build and have systems in place that with our expertise, with our knowledge. So it was a real shift we saw in such a short time. And this obviously carried on for a good sort of few months. And then because we started getting different models, right? Um, and then what we saw was a shift in the context creator. So a lot of us will be operating or thinking in this way, where we're thinking feeds AI, long, rich context, lots of documentation, things that we've, worked a long time. A lot of, knowledge workers like ourselves, professionals, had our own way of practice so that we can perhaps think of transcripts, how can we reuse them, how can we repurpose them, purpose our content. I've seen a lot of examples where people have used long transcripts and then built sort of articles, then built, kind of, if you like, social media content out of that, and also then scripts for, creating video footage, things that will then help them promote their work. So key milestones were things like Claude 3, which came about in 2024. That was one of the biggest sort of, if you like, it had this huge context window. And then we had the GPT 4 came out, and we also started seeing multimodal, meaning it wasn't just thinking about, language, if you like, large language model. We could see that we could create imagery and videos, etc. So we started feeding, if you like, our knowledge into these AIs. And of course, there were lots of questions around what does that mean? Is there safety? And that takes us to a different question. But we, so the tools, certainly long context models, and then Pinecone, you may have heard about. So some of these came about. The shift here is feed AI your best judgment. It reasons better for, it reasons better for it. If it doesn't have that, how does it know? And quantity of context became quality of output. So from here, two paths to era, open the long road through agents, or, we can obviously think about what that means for a lot of us. So, and as we're going through this, think about kind of what you're using it for at the moment. So then we transition to the strategic delegator, which is the delegates decisions, not just tasks. This is where kind of becomes really interesting. Now I'm not just kind of using it to complete a simple task where people are using it for summarizing. We're like, oh, we've gone well past that now. We can delegate. We can use things like make.com. If you remember, we spoke about that, more than a year ago. Or we can set parameters and so that, we know that the AI is able to do this part of the work. We started having these smaller models with, reasoning models. AI thinks before answering. And we started seeing maths, and that was the interesting part where we see sort of, a kind of qualification or competition between Olympiad qualifiers. And we had MCP, open source by Anthropic. So we've come a long, long way. And then we've seen tools, again, this has advanced a lot more, Crew AI, but these was the early days that it came about in, I believe, end of 23, but we saw it kind of in 24, the start. So Mindshift now became delegated decisions, not just tasks. And that is AI stops executing, it starts reasoning. And this was where it became really interesting. And that excitement of like it just doesn't do it, it actually reasons it. When we think of reasoning, it stops and thinks through things like guided reasoning, set constraints. AI explains its approach briefly. We started to see much more of that. It was a massive shift. That decision delegating, make choices within defined boundaries. We saw obviously task execution, Oops, and then we saw outcome reviewed, human audits reasoning, and adjust limits. So this was a massive shift. And then we came to era '07, which is it reminds me of James Bond '07, the agent player. Just the runs AI agents that work unsupervised for hours. And this is the exciting bit, like you can let it do the stuff, and then and a lot of it we feel that kind of friction of like, oh, I'm going to let the AI do it for me. There's a lot of resistance to that. Certainly, I felt it. I know a lot of people I've spoken to is like, what does it mean? I do this, I let it run. And then it sits alongside 5% of organizations, according to the Boston group, identifies AI future built, the rare minority. Only a few people obviously still doing it. Then the key milestones were things like Claude Sonnet 4.5. And then we had which became the benchmark, Claude Skills. We had sort of coming in September. We've spoken a bit about Claude Skills. We saw Claude Co-work. January of this year, 57% of organizations now have agents in production. And so these are some of the tools that have taken it to the next level. So the mind shift is supervised AI agents doing your work autonomously. So most professionals are still catching up and still kind of in era 5. And this is kind of where the future is. And where we are at the moment is in this architect stage. Is the operator, designs the systems that runs the practice, builds skills that act as them, leverage compounds without their direct involvement. Key skills. We saw, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've had Opus 4.7, which with this huge context window. We've got skill execution. We've got skills becoming the architectural unit before we start going into building our agents. And we've also seen 5.5, 88% of organizations using AI in at least one function today. So these are some of the tools. We've got our own operating system. So encode your judgment as skills. Your AI runs natively. Encode your judgment as skills. Your AI runs natively. Worked example. So what I did was examples of this would be build a council. AI built to provide a virtual board of 11 world-class advisors. Every major decision gets stress tested against their voice before it's made. Pre-mortems, blind spots. Great example. We always think of post-mortems after the thing. Do pre-mortems before you execute. Blind spots, second-order consequences. Your judgment. Multiply that. Era's 8 made tangible. Architects don't use AI. They build skills that run as them. That's the piece. There's more to this, but I just want to sort of pause for a moment as I'm sort of sharing things here. Lovely to see you, Liza. We've got John, we've got Sue, Tanisha, we've got Suba. as you're hearing, going through this, and I'll go through kind of, a bit more into how, because there's been a discussion, a lot of people have been asking, what does that mean for me? Or, where does Microsoft Copilot sit in this? I do then go further into these skills. And where do you see yourself in the 8 eras? I hope you managed to catch some of that. I will continue, as I said, and feel free to unmute. What's coming up for you as you heard me kind of go through some of that? Feel free to
I
raise
think
it. Yeah, go ahead, Ivan.
I was just going to say I find myself a bit in each one. It depends on what I am doing. If I would love to get to the confidence where I can say, actually, go away and do your thing and just let me know what I need to do. But we are probably a million miles away from that at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Absolutely. And this is what I kind of call scaffolding, because we'll have a little bit and we will, we'll go in between kind of some of that, but at least we know that this is possible, what's possible, right? Okay, Paul's raised his hand. Paul, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just trying to unmute. Sorry, it's a little noisy. I'm just finishing up the gym, but I am in various stages of using AI for different capacities, like Gentleman just said, depending on the job. Some of them are still a little manual, but like SEO, social media posting to drive traffic and stuff to my business. That is all being automated through Claude and a couple other tools for RSS feeds and so forth. But I would love to get to the point where I just let them loose on, hey, go to this vendor, download all the projects, the products, upload them to my store, as well as currently, so it's seamless for me and more of business building and CEO type tasks than workable tasks. It'd be lovely.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if everybody heard that. Thank you, Paul, for saying that. It'd be a great place to be where you can just kind of give AI all those things and then let it do the work, right? And there is a possibility of doing that, but it's knowing which bits that we want, and we go through our own processes. At the beginning, shared that, SEOs, they know that there has to be a shift, but that means there are going to be a lot of changes that are needed. So they're having to go back and maybe look at some of their processes, look at so there's all that backwards and forwards too, right? So thank you, Paul. Let's see if anyone else is coming in. So yeah, wouldn't it be great to be able to do that? And there are ways we definitely can do that. We don't have to do it ourselves, by the way, and that's the beauty of it. We don't have to do this ourselves. It's knowing what's possible. Oh, Suba, how you doing, Suba?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Bali. As I'm in work, so that's why I couldn't able to on my video. So my question is, not the question. At my point, I want to know the core functions of AI orchestration. So orchestration in the sense how the system handle how and when of an AI ecosystem. So, for example, the three main layers we can take it as the integration part and as well as the automation part and along with the management part. So I want to get deep dive into it. So I believe like in the AI era, I'm probably in the stage of 5 or 4 something. I should be
Fantastic.
very big in that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. So the orchestration is almost like knowing, and things are changing a lot, right? Because we're noticing that a lot of these tools can do it, but we also have to go back to our own processes, right? We also revisit how we're doing things, and I believe that's the piece that a lot of us are thinking about is our own processes. Now, before I ship that off and delegate, if you are maybe a small team, then of course, you've got some processes, but they may not, maybe they're going to need reviewing. How can we also audit what we're doing? How do we and this is the next piece of what we'll talk about in a moment, but thank you. It's good to hear you're there. In fact, I had someone else email me saying that they're also at 5, so thank you, Suba.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll continue. So I'm going to share. So as we go through, and it's great that you know that you're mindful of that, of how far we've come. A lot of people are kind of still sitting at some of the PDF development stage, you know, kind of using it in that way. And so I'm gonna, like I said, I'll continue and please ask if you've got questions, of course. So I'm gonna share my. So we've moved from so beyond kind of era 8, right? The infallible, effable, sorry, intelligence, the largest seed. So you may have heard about kind of what happened a few days ago. And I'll say a little bit about David Silver. If you haven't heard about David Silver, he's the kind of the person behind DeepMind. So you will have seen, if anyone followed this kind of back in what 10 years ago, and I've actually got the video, and I was watching the documentary where we saw AI kind of champion, if you like, Lee Sedol back in 2016. And so with David Silver, so he's kind of the kind of the person behind you know, this company, if you like, the lead developer for AlphaGo. And what they've done, and one of the questions that came up in the WhatsApp group was, so they've got sort of looking at AI in a different, in a way that the governments are supporting this is, you know, and I'll say what the question was in a moment. It was rather than AI be trained on human kind of, you know, interactions, because those have been a lot of the conversations, you know, it's learning from us, and you know, then it's learning more about us, etc., etc. So and what this company's done is he said, well, what about if the AI isn't based on human behavior, right? Then becomes the question, then how is AI making these informed decisions, right? So it, you know, so it's becomes a bit of a game playing or simulation, making decision based on the best outcome, not necessarily humans involved, but rather kind of, you know, training on the best case scenario. So what they've done, they've raised a lot of they've raised, I mean, lots of money, and one of the biggest valuations in Europe happened a few days ago. And we've got sort of this a huge investor here, and we're seeing a lot of backing, and they're seeing it as a super learner, where AI becomes a super learner that discovers knowledge through its own experience without generated data. So that's interesting. Without kind of human generated data, reinforcement learning at frontier scale. So what's happening here is, then what does that mean? What does that look like? Because a lot of what we've seen thus so far has been these models have been trained on kind of how we've been engaging. But now what we're seeing is, what about the simulation? What about kind of the scenarios with this idea of, if you remember Alpha Zero with the kind of mastermind chess. I've actually got the videos. I'll share those with you in the chat if you're interested, just kind of seeing what happened in that instance. So our mission is to make first contact with super intelligence, and this is kind of taking it beyond where we've come to, where we are now thinking about orchestrating or putting agents doing these various tasks, and you know, using experts, or perhaps trying to do it with ourselves. If you're kind of, you know, a developer, if you're like Subo, who's able to do this stuff. But we can see kind of we're able to do that and have, you know, experts kind of supports through this. But what we're seeing is massive shift in the way we're going to see super learners, that the tools will be able to do without the experience. So without kind of the human, if you like, in the loop, if you like. So that's kind of interesting stuff. So I wanted to put that out there in the direction things are going. So as you're hearing that, and you may have heard about kind of the company, you know, and the question that came about in the WhatsApp group, if you're none of you, if I think a few of you are in the WhatsApp group, Richard posed a question. If it doesn't get trained on human data, if you like, without the hallucinations and stuff, how will it know? That was one of the questions. Unfortunately, Richard's not here today, but the question is, that's how it gets trained. It kind of looks at the scenario, what it is, and then it sort of based on its calculations, it will give you a way that the tool would do it, as opposed to kind of us coming in and saying, well, this is how we would do it, and now improve that. So it's going to be an interesting as these tools develop. It's not that we can just plug this tool in. It will sit sort of in tools like Google or Gemini, if you're using Gemini. So think of AI using different tools. So rather than sticking to just one, think of tools that will support whatever the kind of the work you're doing, right? So often, but we're going to lean. I mean, that a lot of the work I've been doing is in Claude, but as we're looking at various tools, become kind of learn how to use the AI, as opposed to kind of sticking to one tool and say, I'm just going to stick to this. That would be my message from here. So I'm going to continue. If you don't have a question, I think somebody had a question here. I'm just going to see. Okay, Ivan's just had to leave. All right, I'm going to continue. So a lot of things I'm sure are probably going on as you're thinking about some of this here. Okay, so there is more research, and like I said, I'll share the clip, which was the direction. So as we look at, previously we've spoken a lot about the top frontier models, and somebody messaged me the other day saying, what about sort of Microsoft Copilot? What's happened there? And you haven't spoken about it. I was like, okay, we're gonna speak about it. So a lot of so companies we've got, and I know within the ecosystem, people perhaps are still kind of in the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem, just because the company's been using it and licensing it, etc., etc. So where they were, so I'll talk a little bit about kind of the space there. The enterprise AI you already have, you are using it at era 2 or perhaps even 3, 8, beg your pardon. So era 2, if you like, February 23, we had things like Bing Chat upgrade to prompt assistant. And then if you like, we're going to jump, we'll do this in era 4, then November 2023, we saw a general, kind of availability of Copilot embedded in Word, Excel, Outlook, Teams. I remember people kind of going, oh yeah, we've got AI now built in. Then we saw kind of in 24 Copilot, we saw it in sales or service decision support layers, already kind of embedding it in 8 now in March of 2026. Last month we saw co-work, long-running multi-step execution, GPT kind of 5.4, thinking inside Microsoft 365 across kind of the Dynamics and Power App, things like Adobe Express. So we have been seeing, the question isn't whether your organization uses Copilot, it's whether you're using it at era 2 or era 8. I think that's the question. I have spoken, in fact, I spoke with someone who was works at Coursera, right? And they were still using it kind of at a level which was, to me, seemed like 2 years from where we are now. So they hadn't kind of started executing it. So that would be the question, as opposed to, yeah, we've got it, but the question is, how are we using it within the organization or where we are? So the leaders, a new imperative would be thinking about using AI for tasks. And so, as Ivan was saying before he left, thinking about various tasks that we might be using it for. So we're looking at that era. Of course, that's what we need it for. That's great. But what are we doing in building, or where's the gap? And a lot of the gap might be for us as, super intelligence is there, but how are we using it day to day in building skills? The gap between them is your competitive advantage, right? So if we know people you're speaking to are just using it for certain tasks, writing emails, a lot of people are still doing it, putting a voice in, but are they doing it to building something that they can actually then say, I'm going to build this, or, kind of different various agents or have this whole kind of orchestration. But because once we do that, we can start seeing how the tools are working. I mean, there is that question of how much do we let go, because we still need to test and we still need to make sure that, what the output is, it supporting us. So the intellectual OS is your judgment encoded as skills. Your AI runs natively. Each skill is a file in your operating system. So think of it as the OS, your operating system. And that is what we're building. Once you start thinking about building skills, and skills isn't just in Claude, you do have skills in other models. And if you've looked at Perplexity, you can build skills there also. So I would also learn to do that, learn to build those, and then actually that's yours, right? Again, people build GPTs. That's what we have. It's how do we then plug our knowledge, how do we plug that into these tools so that we can then, apply them. Shortcut from era 5 to 8. Here's how you start. Pick one repeated decision, the one in your week you're sick of making, right? You're tired of making. So what's that repetitive thing? Think of that. And if you don't know, you can ask your AI to tell you, because they'll generate a report on things you keep asking them. So even if you're, thinking, I keep doing this, or perhaps you don't know what you keep doing, then ask the AI to tell you and say, okay, provide me a report of the things I've asked you over the past, the time I've been working with you. What are the things that I'm asking you repeatedly? And so take those as a way. And rather than repeatedly doing those, you can actually then create a skill, or you can create a way to build in the AI. So write the teaching brief. How would you teach a smart junior to make it for you? That's a skill. So we pass that on. So the decision filter skill runs your priorities against any incoming request. The meeting prep skill turns any calendar invite into a preparation brief. Most leaders never build their first skill. The ones who do compress 3 years of evolution into 90 days. So I would say start building, start thinking about how they're going to support you, and think about how that can help you as you think about taking those skills to the kind of next level. And I can show you a little bit behind the scenes if you like, also how I'm doing this, and that would help. So as I'm speaking, if you'd like to share, perhaps you can put it in the chat. What would you say you're doing repeatedly? And have you created a way AI is supporting you? That would be a great thing to find out, so we can see how people are. Are you doing something repeatedly, and how are you using AI to support you? That would be great to hear. You can either put it in the chat or you can share, and I can sort of say a little bit about kind of a few things that you might want to think about if you haven't. And I'll go into one of my tools that I has become my go-to, but not the only one. Suba.
Yeah, when I work with ChatGPT or Claude, if any kind of LLMs, it begins with to use a scheduled prompt, and it's grounded in my work data. So if I want to get more data, means I should ground it into the scheduled prompt again and again to rephrase it and mention that AI don't hallucinate. As you said, we don't know how the data shouldn't be hallucinated. For that, I should take with verification as well. So data takes from which where the verified sources as well. So if I'm going to do the customs agent using with Zapier or make.com, um, the repeated task, mostly if I get any errors, if I stuck in anywhere at the level in the make.com and do the integration part, if I ask the AI, okay, can you check the error which where it is comes from? So again, it repeatedly keep on asking the same things where I ask if I stuck with the error in the make.com or the Zapier or any kind of things which is related to the integration part.
Okay, fantastic. You can get it to review. And the nice thing with this super intelligence, you get the AI does the reviewing. You can get the AIs to review as well, right? You can build that into make.com scenario where you get them to kind of check the output amongst the different models. I don't know if you've done that, Suba, where you set that up and then it kind of tests it across the different models. It's
Yes,
actually
I said that with Zapier, along Zapier and Vappy. I just integrated with the voice mode and collect all the details from Vappy. Vappy is the voice generated text. So it will, when connected with Vappy and Zapier, if you just give the prompt to the Zapier, means it completely build the agent. We just give the prompt. If you're stuck anywhere else, means again the task should be repeated from the first. So I think I to think about the advanced chat technique or move on beyond that. I should learn about it.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we know sometimes how the pieces go together, but it's the
Yes,
output, right? It's the output. If you're not kind of satisfied with the output or the quality of that, then it's like something's not working, and we've got to go back and look at what's not working. And so there are ways to do that, right? So we can definitely do
yeah,
that. Um, I've had something from Tanisha. He's just said here, when replying to an email, most probably or the same email chain. Okay, so when there's a thread or you've got a thread of an email which is repeat, I believe it's a repetitive thing, where it's kind of you've got an email chain that you're responding to. Yeah, it can definitely be done in using these models for sure. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit behind the scenes that may would help. Any other thoughts before we continue? I've just got to see. Sue said, not a repetitive task, but I built my website using AI. Fantastic. Sue, what did you use?
Genspark. So
Philip?
I use Genspark. I use Genspark for everything. I found it better than most tools. I've tried, but I work with all of them. But it wasn't easy. So when people say, "Oh, you can just churn up a website," it's not straightforward. You actually do need to have some technical background to understand what's going on. So it made me appreciate my developers a lot more and realize that, AI gives you stuff. It's not necessarily right, as we know. So it was quite challenging, but achievable.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah. And share. Feel free to share the website. Could this be applied to creation of AI brain related to physical activities like goal swing? Instructions provide a closed loop of interaction learning. Yeah, absolutely. John, yeah, we spoke about that. You can definitely I was going to have another colleague join us today and they're not here, but for sure we can look at have AI assess how people are performing and for sure, right? And so their devices, we can see this because a lot of the conversations been around kind of at the moment, we're talking about large language models, if you like, or video generation or, other kind of visual output, but absolutely. So if anyone knows of one, then please share with John. I will connect John with Blammer because we've been talking. I mean, Charles might know more about this, in fact, about wearables, where we're seeing much more of wearables, where we're seeing performance improvement, right? That's certainly something to be thinking about. So we've seen, so Sue was talking, absolutely, Sue, building websites. People think you just build it, you're like, okay, and then we just like that's sort of illusion, right? That everything it will do everything, and you're like, well, it doesn't. We still need to check. We still need to check that it's our content. Does it align with what it is? Does it? So there's number of things we're going through as we do that. So even having the HTML kind of even having that as a file, you upload it. What does that look like? You're going to put it on your website. Is it going to be live or active? And yeah, so many different layers. So congratulations, you did that. What are some of the, so I'm going to share something that I think that some things that people often ask about. So when we're using these tools, often, not the conversation that often gets had, if you like. So I'll share. Um, Tom, how are you using it at the moment? I know you said you started using design. You messaged me.
Yeah, well, that was really the first time I used it. I mean, it's a new feature, right? I don't know. I think you probably gathered from some of our conversations. I sometimes feel like I have a mental block against going too deep into it, which is probably the only way you learn these things. But I found that Claude Design was very easy to learn just with the instructions. It's amazing how, I don't know code. I've never used code and that kind of thing, but it gave me a couple of graphics that I love and I just imported all the different elements, my colors, some other graphics I've created over the past year or two, and it gave me something new that I like a lot. So I look forward to using it more.
Fantastic. Thank you. So that was another one. I think this is the thing, right? So knowing what it is that we're using these tools for, we know how far we've come. It's making those decisions and some of the stuff that we'll be using that we learned before, which is part of the whole scaffolding, right? We don't not use what we've already learned. Like context, we're going to use it. It's like, but the scaffolding is this is where we've come, how far. And absolutely, thank you. I'm going to share some of the things that get left, I feel, is when people start talking through these tools. So often people say, by the way, if you haven't noticed, you've got these, you've got these little toggles. So if you're going in between, often gets forgotten. We've got the code component, or we've got the chat here. Sorry, co-work, and we got chat. So think of chat as what we normally use in our GPT. We often use it for conversations. So it's more of a conversation, we're looking at a task. Here we get the thing done. So this is kind of using code for getting things done, and this is kind of getting the thing to help us build something. So those are how I would view kind of the Claude environment. And this is the desktop version. And then when you are thinking about these kind of different avenues, artifacts are kind of a memory of like the visuals that say Tom mentioned there that become your HTML files, if you like, HTML files that we can access. And of course, we can customize, but the key thing we also have is when we get we can relaunch and we can get some new. If we've got credit on there, we can kind of access and get some. I'm noticing a lot of I'm using my usage quite quickly. So what Anthropic did was they gave some extra credit, if you like. I believe you have to kind of relaunch it here. By doing that, you can activate and access the kind of new. It does that. So if I click on it, it kind of clicks out of it, and then it kind of relaunches. If you're using Claude, that is. So, do most of you have the desktop version of Claude? It should appear on my screen a minute, so I'll get it back on. And I'll show you kind of some of the settings behind here. Have most of you got, yeah, hi, you do? Fantastic. Liza, do you as well? Do you have the desktop version of Claude? Charles is saying no, you don't.
I
Okay.
don't. No.
You haven't got that one. Okay, thank you. Good to see you, by the way. And Charles is saying no. You have different, John, do you have Claude? Are you using Claude?
I do not, but I see it on the horizon coming my way for sure.
Yeah. And if you want, like, I'm happy to kind of jump on a call, help you kind of set up with that. Some of the things I would say as I'm here, I'm going to show you something that all of you, in fact, I put together a document. If you'd like, I can share it with you. All kind of some of the instructions on setting that up. I can definitely do that. I'll also share those links in a minute, the ones I mentioned, the documentary. I think it's worth watching. So I'm gonna share kind of what happens when we go into Claude and where you want to. I don't know if you've done this, Suba, yourself, but you want to go in and you want to actually just put in your Claude instructions, some of the things that I put in that document, I go through step by step in preferences that might help. Kind of thinking about, kind of working in this space. Chat font, again, you can modify that from your end. It's worth absolutely doing. And so some of these often can, like, you wonder, when am I going to use these dispatches? Certainly you can send work, and I was going to send it. I've created a cheat sheet which I'll give you some of the terminology here, because it can throw us when we're looking at it going, what do I do? And so it's worth kind of putting those instructions in. Remember a couple of years, 18 months ago, perhaps less, we started kind of doing in the GPT environment. And so when you're thinking about capabilities, when we're looking at adding capabilities, of course, we can connect different tools, but we can also customize our skills. So this is kind of what I'm saying to people is, like, if you're building your skills, then you want to be able to kind of have these in that you can kind of invoke and use them. So absolutely start thinking about building these skills and be mindful of how you're building those skills so that you can use them when you're in the environment. So if you're in the interface, then you can use these and build in this space, right? So these are just, I mean, it looks, I mean, I've got used to it, but I know for some people it's a lot, because there's different steps that are involved. But for sure, it's one of the places. I still use my GPT, not as much. I use Gemini. And so between those, and Manus AI sometimes. Um, so those are some of the tools that I'm using. And then as I start kind of building and putting these into more kind of automation, for sure. I'm also going back, like everyone here, we're looking at our own operating process, our own systems, right? What's helping me? What's my onboarding? So a skill, we can actually put our whole onboarding into a skill. So for sure, if anyone's looking into building that, please feel free to reach out and we can obviously have that conversation about building a skill. What does that look like? How do I say, what are the different ways the skill builds? And then how do I add this sub skills within that? So when I'm using it in the environment, and then we can also download them as well and keep them if you're kind of thinking about kind of, having these, and worried that if you're kind of committed to one tool, but those are the things that we're building and supporting. So I've got a couple of links. So Paul's saying, I'm going to read some of these. So installing Claude and Manus tomorrow, and would love some onboarding help. Fantastic, Paul. Yeah, I'll send you a note on that. Really enjoyed working in Manus. I know a few of you. I think Charles, you've worked in Manus, right? Manus AI. No? Which ones are you using, Charles? Because I can't remember which one you're using.
Really, I'm just using ChatGPT. I've just built several GPTs, and then I created a more or less an advisory board and a core group of authors that I follow pretty stringently, and put them in there as voices and sort of a uh, advisory board symposia kind of thing to give me insights.
Fantastic. And you know what you can do? You can keep it in that environment and continue there, and you can actually download it and upload it into Claude. So that's
Ooh.
one way of doing, kind of like, so we don't feel like, oh, I'm going to be leaving that and not using it, but we can.
Well, and that's why I haven't. I spent all that time training it, and I didn't want to leave it behind and start over again, kind of thing. So that's very cool. I didn't realize you could do that. Thank
Yeah,
you for
you can.
sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome, because you can import and you can do it in that way for sure. So I'm gonna share. I think you'll enjoy. So these are just some of the links from today's session, and there's a documentary in there too, which you'll enjoy viewing. Just kind of thinking about how far things have come, but it's a bit of history, right? From looking at where David Silver, I got really intrigued, and it was a reminder of what happened at that stage and how quickly we're kind of shifting, and how how AI did better than this kind of superhuman, right? That was a really interesting documentary to watch. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here. I know we're approaching the hour. I know there's a lot to be thinking about. I'll share those slides. Thank you, Sue, for sharing. And it really gets us thinking about it. We just don't plug and play, right? It's not like you put in something and go, okay, it will just do it. Thank you, Suba. Great having you all on. I will share info. John, thank you again for coming today. Good to see you. I'll share info with you via email for sure. And Paul, I'll reach out to you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Continue in this space, and like I said, I'll share with you. And Tanisha, yay! And it was brilliant having you. All right, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everyone, and see you in a couple of weeks. I'll share the topic as we move forward. You're welcome. Ciao for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.